Hey boys and girls, welcome to MTG Ownage. Today we're going to be doing a little bit of a commander deck tech. This is a deck I've been playing for about a year or so now. And you guys who know me, you already know. You know exactly what this is. Today I'm going to be going through this entire deck. I'm going to be showing cards in front of this camera. I've got this little setup so that hopefully I don't have to edit the video. I really don't want to have to edit. It's going to take forever. But if this setup is good and you guys are happy watching this sort of thing, I can pound out videos like this, doing deck techs, and maybe invite a friend over and bring their deck and talk all about it. As this is it. So yeah, I've got everything configured. It took forever to get this set up right, so please like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. It means a lot, and it helps me keep going. So without any further ado, and without any more Shakespeare sayings, let's get right into it. You're looking at Rosheen, Meanderer. And okay, so this card, let me give you a little background, a little backstory about why I chose Rosheen Meanderer. I love big creatures and big spells and saying I'm going to one-shot you, but without going infinite. And that's what Rosheen's about. Rosheen is a 4 casting cost giant shaman lady. We'll call her a lady. Yeah. There's some jokes about this picture. You see what's sagging there? Something's sagging. All right. Well, anyway, she taps for 4 mana. 4 mana. Sorry about the shakiness. I'm doing what I can here. But it can only be used to spend. It can only be spent on things with X. X in the cost. So X spells, things that cost X to activate. So that's what this deck is mainly themed about. It's basically getting Rosheen out on turn 3 or 4 and starting to do some crazy stuff with X without having to go infinite. So there's no infinite in this deck. It happens. Yeah, you get combos, they go infinite, you win. I understand that's a thing, but to me, that is my biggest distaste with Magic. When things go infinite, I'm like, I just feel like, why am I playing anymore? Why does Wizards of the Coast even print these cards? This is not cool. So I personally try to not do that in my decks, but sometimes it happens. I don't care if you do. I'm not trying to diss the whole thing. It's just a personal preference. I really don't care if you go infinite. I'm going to just try to stop you, but if you do, I'm just going to scoop, and that's the game, This deck, it makes you scoop by going, I'm going to hit you for 100. So if you go in infinite, it's not going to beat you. But this has turned out to be one of my stronger decks. All right, so this is Rosheen. This is our 4-drop. This is our 4 CMC thing. So we're going to talk about her anymore. She's going to get set off to the side. Or, we might reference back to her, but this is the only time I'm going to show her. That's why I'm showing her. It's really important to note that everything is about her. Sean and Ryan, thank you guys. You guys have helped me build this deck from the start, and I just, a little personal shout out to you guys for that, because you gave me tons of ideas, you threw tons of cards at me, and this deck wouldn't be where it is today without your input. Of course, I've taken it in my own direction since then, but still, the madness all started with you guys. All right, where do we even start? I guess the lands are all right here. I've got everything else laid out by CMC. There's like 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, and so on. But we'll talk about the lands real quick. So what lands are crucial in this deck? Well, it's obviously a red and green GRUUL deck, because that's the color of the commander, and that's what it has to be. And of course, I've made some decisions that have gone against the recommendations of people like Ryan. Sorry, Ryan. Yeah, I got to do my own thing. But one of the big things, and I'll just start with this, because this was a decision that Ryan was like, no, don't do it. Don't do it, man. The Urza's Thran lands. I have all 3 of them in here. Urza's Mine, Urza's Power Plant, and Urza's Tower. So if you get all 3 of these out, it's 3 lands that tap for 7 mana, which can make for a slightly larger X spell. And as you'll find out in this deck, a little later, there's some doublers. So this 2 or 3 mana actually ends up being like 7 or 8 per tap at certain points. So it's not just 2 or 3 mana, it's a lot. And I think Ryan's big point is the reason not to play these is you'll never have all 3. It's going to be very rare that you have all 3. Well, I found a bit of a solution to that. There are ways to search for any land. I don't actually have a ton of them in here. The main one I have is a new card from Theros that has a nice X in it. So it goes very nicely. If you get this early game, you cast it for 3, you get all 3 Tron lands, and you're going. with all 3 Tron lands. Nyla's Intervention. It can hit flying creatures for double X, twice X. So if there's a bunch of flyers, you can just wipe the flyers. Or you can just search out a ton of lands out of your deck, including the Tron lands. So anytime you get this, you get all 3 Tron lands. Pretty amazing. Of course, there's crop rotation and stuff like that, but I'm not playing those. I went with the X version. So this ends up being a giant tap for 7 land base plus more, unless you want to kill flyers. But even so, Nyla's Intervention is something you can always get back later. So I guess I'm just going to bring up some of these cards as they come with the X. So Nyla's Intervention is a really good card in here. It goes well with those. So you can always double cast it because I have other things in here, like Reap the Past. Return X cards at random to your hand from your graveyard. Basically what this does in this deck is return your graveyard to your hand. You just make X however many cards you have in your yard, and suddenly you have your whole yard back in your hands. So it's not uncommon to be able to double cast things. People kill your lands, you get them back anyway, that sort of stuff. This is kind of an all-star. This is an amazing card in this deck because it's just such a massive return. Yeah, returning your whole graveyard. Turns out that's good. Alright, so there's a couple X spells that I've already talked about, so I won't talk about those 2 anymore. This is going to be the I've talked about pile, I guess. I'll put it over here. And let's keep talking about the lands for a second. So, some other lands. Of course, I've got the old GRUUL Turf, and the reason is it taps for 2. Lands that tap for multi are really good in this deck because they're just doublers and stuff. So 2 ends up being 4. If it gets tripled or doubled somehow, it ends up being 6. So a little bit better than a basic land, and it fixes color a little bit. Castle Garenbrig because, well, there's a lot of big creatures in here. A lot of big creatures. Come on, focus. Let the viewers read. There's a lot of big creatures in the deck, so Castle Garenbrig ends up allowing you to cast them a turn earlier or save a little mana. Or I guess it just wants to focus on the background. Get over it, camera. Get over it. No one wants to see the background when I'm trying to talk about a card up front. So yeah, you pay 4, it taps for 6, but the 6 can only be used for creatures. And there's a lot of X creatures, as we'll find out. There's a joke that this is actually a Hydra tribal deck. It's not. It just happens to have a lot of Hydras in it. And stuff like Castle Garenbrig just makes them be one more, or easier to cast. There's also a lot of creatures that have a CMC of like 7 or so. And that didn't focus. I gotta like do this thing. Go way in, then zoom out. I guess I'll get used to that. Nyxbloom Ancient, which of course is freaking amazing in this deck. Just look at it. If you tap a permanent for mana, it produces 3 times that much. Which means Rosheen now taps for 12. So if you get an X spell with this out, it's, well, at least 12, plus probably like 6 to 20 more. So with Nyxbloom Ancient out, it's like your next spell ends the game. It's nuts. This card is nuts. Theros. Woo. Alright, so, well, Nyxbloom Ancient. Yeah, it's crazy in here. I'm going to put it in the talked about pile now. So this is going to be pretty scattered. Eventually I'll go through the CMC of what's left. But for now, I'm just going to kind of scatter it with whatever comes up. So some of you may like that, some of you may not. But, you know, got to do something. Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx, is in here. This is a pretty expensive card. So I guess I'll also say at this point that this deck is around $500. I scanned everything, priced it up. It's about a $500 deck. So that's probably pretty cheap as far as commander decks go, but I know there's people that like say, I don't want to spend that much, but it's not like it started that way. So Nykthos is pretty expensive, but it taps for your devotion. I'll talk about more about price in a second. So at some point, well, this is just, you know, taps for 1 mana, but at some point in the game, this starts tapping for, well, you know how commanders get, commander games get, you end up getting a bunch of stuff on the board. So eventually this will tap for like 10 mana or so, and then you can just, boom, crazy big X spell, and there's another 10. So there's just a lot of things that end up adding, you know, 5, 10 mana or so per card, and with all that in X, total insanity. So those are some of the multi-tappers. Any other multi-tappers? I don't think so. I am playing these lands. I forget what set these are from. Shards of Alara, I think. Mosswort Bridge. Come on, focus. Mosswort Bridge is really nice. I really wish this would just focus. All right. This is the bane of my video right now, is the fact that this won't focus. I don't want to explain the card. I want you to be able to pause and read it. So I need at least one point where this focuses. Alright, well this is really nice because it's really easy to get 7 or 10 power worth of creatures out in this deck. Really easy. And then you can just, you know, pay 1, or I guess it ends up being 2 because tapping counts as a mana too, basically. So for a very cheap amount, you can basically cast another huge thing with Mosswort Bridge. Super nice. It's kind of the same with Spine Rock Knoll, except you got to do damage. You got to do 7 damage, which turns out to be pretty easy to do in this deck. So just another big cheap free spell just off your lands that you're playing, which is super nice. Got a couple of the cycling lands. I'm not going to talk much about these. Tranquil Thicket, Forgotten Cave. You probably already know what they do. They're just the old cycling lands. I feel like you might as well have these because late game it really stinks to draw a land when you need a good spell. Let's see. Some of these lands can kind of be replaced and they're not the best choice. Like I have Game Trail, which is okay. You know, it's just a multi-tap. Let's do this. See if we can get it to focus. If you got a mountain or forest, it just comes in untapped. Very nice fixer. Rootbound Crag, very similar. I may have said one of those wrong. Oh, this one you got to reveal from your hand a forest or a mountain, or it's tapped. Not a big deal. This one you just have a mountain or forest, it's untapped. And of course Command Tower because it's a color fixer. So we get a little basic color fixers there. I guess we'll continue on the theme of color fixing real quick. Wooded Foothills is a no-brainer. If you have one, put it in, you know, kind of thing. So, but with Wooded Foothills, we typically want to get one of these mountain forest dual lands. Come on. It's nice and slow. Oh, you gotta go nice and slow. Cinderglade, Mountain Forest, Sheltered Thicket, Cycling Mountain Forest, and Stomping Ground Mountain Forest. So you can grab those. And real quick, I'm gonna just go into a little subtopic here of, you know, about those mountain forests. There's kind of a point of if you cast Farseek, which can get a mountain, you say, hey, I'm grabbing a mountain, and you grab one of those dual lands too. So Farseek, super awesome for 2 mana to be able to search a land, and it'd be one of those dual lands, like the best turn 2 cast, one of the best turn 2 casts. And it's the same with Nature's Lore. So I've got both of those in here, very similar spells. This one you just say, okay, come on. Grab a forest, and you just grab one of those dual lands again. So just a couple cheap, nice ramps spells. Those are in the 2-drop category. So I've pulled a few from that. And yeah, there's a bunch of basics. There's 12 forests. Some of them are snow covered. We're going to just put those over there now. And we've got 6 mountains. A little less mountains. We can search them up if we need. But there's a lot of multi-green devotion type stuff. And now the last land, and probably the all-star land of the deck. So I'm going to make sure this focuses before I continue on. Alright, Kessig Wolf Run. Gives +X+O and trample to one of your creatures. The trample and the X is massive. This is a game ender. You can end the game with the weakest, puniest creature if you got tons of mana and this. So this is just such an all-star, such a just destroyer of games. It's like, oh, you've killed everything, but the only thing I have left is a Llanowar Elf. But I still have Kessig Wolf Run and a ton of mana. Yep, he's just a 41 trample, no big deal, coming at you. You know, so this, but you know, even if you leave X as 0, you can just give things trample. This is just such a good card in Commander in general. Highly recommended in any deck with GRUUL. So yeah, Llanowar Elves in the deck, probably the best first turn play in this deck is that. Unless, of course, you're playing something like Soul Ring, which, of course, is in the deck, because why wouldn't it be? It's Commander. Yeah, you have one in your deck, or you just don't play. All right, let's move on to 1-drops, since we're talking about 1-drops. There's the other 3 1-drops. We got a Birds of Paradise and Berserk. This is kind of an expensive card, so you might have something else in place of this. This is another thing that just ends games, and also you can play some weird tricks. So you probably know the Berserk tricks, but I'll talk about them real quick in case you don't. Well, in general with this deck, since it's already going to have some massive creatures, this just turns it into a massive trampler, and you know, hitting somebody for 80 generally ends the game. And there's some other combos that kind of go along with Berserk in here too, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But yeah, of course, you can kill opponent's creatures. Say you're playing against 4 people and someone attacks someone else with a mean creature and you say, hey, I'll berserk it. It does extra damage to one of your opponents and the creature dies at the end of combat. So it's like a 2-for-1 if you manage to play it in a way where 2 other people are fighting and you get a berserk in there. So berserk's just super awesome. There's a reason it's worth, like, whatever it's worth. I don't know. I got this one when it was like 15 bucks or so, so not too bad. But I think it keeps going up. I don't know what it's worth now. 25, 30 or something. And another just super good equipment that is at a crazy low price that shouldn't. And another Theros card. Theros has some real bombs in it, man. Theros is a good set for Commander. Shadow Sphere. +1/+1, trample and lifelink. And you can drop it first turn. And you can make things lose hexproof and indestructible. This card handles so many problems, and you can team up with allies to say, hey, during this turn, I'll just happen to make permanents lose indestructible and people can start killing gods. Or if someone does a board wipe and you want the gods to die, you can activate Shadow Sphere. And the lifelink trample saves your life so much. This card is insane. This is going to be like one of those $50 equipments before long, along with all the swords, in my opinion, because it's just so good, man. It's just so good. If this was a sword that costed 3 and had 2 to equip, it'd be good. It doesn't give you protection or anything. It's kind of, it does the opposite of protection. It makes things lose hexproof. It doesn't do anything against protection. It only makes things lose hexproof and indestructible. It doesn't make things lose protection. So it doesn't exactly defeat any of the swords, but it defeats gods. And the lifelink trample is amazing. All right, let's move on. Enough about Shadow Sphere. That card's awesome. You probably get it now. Yeah, it's awesome. Bunch of other cards. Let's move on to the 2-drops. I've got a stack of X's as well, but the 2-drops, there's some all-stars here. You might be disliking the video. Make sure you double dislike. That way it doesn't actually dislike. Because, yeah, he's in here. And he's got X. So, you know what happens. Some of you have suffered the wrath. Ryan, Sean, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. No, I'm not. I'm not. But this card's just funny. Just look at him. Just imagine having all your lands wiped by these 2 goofy-looking orcs. I always want to say goblins, but they're orcs, orcish settlers. So yeah, once you get a lot of X, once you're sitting on like 20X or whatever, you get a ton of mana, as you can already kind of see by this deck. You get a ton of mana, and with Rosheen in there, Rosheen taps to destroy 2 lands, and then whatever else you got, along with orcish settlers. And you might think, oh well, the board's going to go around and he's going to die, but that's not exactly the case because there's a lot of ways to give everything in here haste. So if he has haste, it happens the turn you play him. You play him for 2 mana, you give him haste with whatever you got, and boom, you blow up your worst enemy's lands. So if there's like, how Commander games go, if there's one person that's like just dominating the board, you can wreck their lands and all your allies will be like, hooray! Or if you just have so much mana, you can wreck everyone's lands but yours. Now some people say that lands are sacred in Commander, and I tend to agree to an extent, but this is targeted removal. This is like a 1-for-1, and it's pretty hard to get off. It has counterplay. It's just a 1/1. If you have an instant, you can kill him before I equip like boots on him or something, because of course there's lightning greaves. So that's one of the ways you put the greaves on him so you can respond to the greaves. Or I guess when you play him, you do have priority, so you could activate it unless you're tapping. Now, yeah, you could activate it before your opponents could really react. They could respond to the activation, but it's a little late. But yeah, so if I have, I guess the only thing that would ruin that. No, actually, it wouldn't. Everything in here, there's no way it happens immediately because I do have Rhythm of the Wild, but this triggers and I have to choose haste or the 1/1. I think you can respond to the riot. Can you? Can you respond to the riot? I don't know. Maybe you can't. If you can, then you can counterplay him. So there's a little bit of counterplay. That's the whole point of getting to. But there's also ways to give him haste. So you play him and it happens in the same turn. You can catch people by surprise and wreck a lot of lands. But it's not like an Armageddon or a Jokalops. Words escape me. Or a Cataclysm or Jokalops that just flat out destroys all lands. I got to have a ton of mana. And I got to get a 1/1 through. And I got to be able to give him haste. So there's it's not just a blatant whiteboard can't be countered type of thing. But yeah, some people might say don't play this in Commander, you're not allowed or whatever, and that's fine. If I was playing with a group that said lands are sacred, you can't touch them, I just replace them with some other big X spell that will kill you. So not a big deal. But he's just an angle because lands become a problem in Commander, and sometimes you just got to get rid of some certain lands like Glacial Chasm or something that will just never ever go away unless someone kills it. Alright, so let's continue with the 2 drops. I have Scavenging Ooze. He doesn't really synergize necessarily super well, but he just helps counter graveyard problems. There's a lot of graveyard problems in general with commanders, so he's just a creature that can help out. He's just in there basically because he's so good. Incubation Druid now has a point. Taps for multiple mana. So it taps for 1, but once you get a +1/+1 counter on it, it taps for 3 mana. And if you're doubling that with something like whatever that creature I talked about earlier that makes it tap for triple, this will tap for 9. So there's just crazy stuff like that. And if you're playing Rhythm of the Wild, I'm going to put Rhythm of the Wild, you can use the Riot to put a +1/+1 counter on it right away and not have to pay the giant adapt cost. And I guess I'll just go ahead and talk about the Great Henge super quick. Great Henge also puts a +1/+1 counter on it, and this is just another amazing card that any deck playing green needs in it. I managed to pull this out of a pack early on, the Throne of Eldraine days when it was only like a $9, $10 card, and now it's like up to 40. So hope you get one before it goes any higher, because this card is going to continue to rise indefinitely. It's just an insane card. Throne of Eldraine is just an insane set, really. Jeez, they printed so much crazy stuff. Anyway, total side point. Incubation Druid, well, yeah, the whole price and set thing is a side point. But the point is, it puts the +1/+1 counter on Incubation Druid so there's ways where you don't even have to pay the cost, and this just comes out tapping for 3 as soon as it's ready. So pretty amazing. Now another one you wouldn't really think of, another Throne of Eldraine card, Wildborn Preserver. Flash, Reach. So Flash and Reach are super nice. Definitely needs some Reach. This deck doesn't have many flyers, so Reach really comes in handy. But also, it has X in the wording. So you can use Rosheen to plus this thing up when you play a non-human. And almost everything in here is a non-human. So if you end up playing something have extra mana or just want yet another buff creature, this guy is really easy to buff up and get massive in this deck. And as you've seen, he doesn't have Trample, but there are plenty of ways to get Trample. So another super nice 2-drop, 2 casting cost thing. Constant Mists, an old Stronghold card. This is the only fog in the deck. Late in the game, you tend to have a million lands because you've searched them all out with stuff. So this is just something that can just drag out the game if you've got big creatures swinging at you and just need to hold out a few more turns. Yeah, this is just a game winner. You can just be like, Constant Miss, buy it back by sacking one of these worthless forests because I got a million of them. So yeah, sacking your land sucks, of course, but it's Constant Miss, man. It's Constant Mist. So this is the best fog in my opinion, at least in this deck, because this deck searches out so many lands. So there's just never a shortage of lands to be like, I don't want to pay the buyback. It's like, I might as well pay the buyback because I'm going to need it. This is another no-brainer. 2 mana, search up a land. Really strong early game play. And a fine late game play if you've got Kessig Wolf run. So just a nice creature to have. Oh, this is an all-star. This is a card that Sean hates. Yeah, we know. So I know that anyone else out there watching don't know who Sean and Ryan are, but like I said, I'm not going to talk about it anymore. Anyway, people hate this card. It doubles your mana. So once you get like 20 mana in your mana pool, you spend 3 of it, and it turns into 34. So just an insane card in this deck. Once it's going off, this just makes it really go off. Pretty awesome. Yeah, this card has won me so many games because just the number gets high enough that it's like, well, and now I'm dead. All right, Rampant Growth. You know what Rampant Growth is. It searches for a land for 2 mana and puts it into play tapped. It's not going to focus, but there it is. Yeah. Another thing about doubling cube, it doesn't really do anything till you have, 8 mana in your mana pool, because you got to spend 3 of it. So I don't know, if you pay, I don't know, there's some number where it starts good. Is it 7? Yeah, it's 7. So if you get 7 mana in your mana pool, you activate this, it's now 8. So once you get to 8, and then it's just the more mana you have over 7, the better it gets. So it's like a mana rock that it just scales huge, but it doesn't do anything when your mana's screwed. So if you can't get above 6 or 7 mana, this is totally worthless. So that's kind of its drawback. You have to already be going off for this to do anything at all. But once it does something, it does a massive something. And I don't know if this works with Nyxbloom Ancient. I don't think it does, because it just does a flat double the amount of mana in your mana pool. I don't know if that counts as adding, and if it would triple. Someone can leave a comment about that. I might Google it. It hasn't came up yet in the game, so I haven't actually looked it up. But if this works with Nyxbloom Ancient, that's just insane. That's just insane. All right, let's move on. So we can go to the 3 drops now. Of course, there's Rhythm of the Wild. We've already talked about that. Llanowar Tribe, Modern Horizons card, pretty strong in this deck. You know, it's a 3 mana elf. That's a 3/3, and it taps for 3 mana. So this is just very easy to help you scale up hard with a 1 creature that basically taps for some Black Lotus mana of 3. Lotus mana. Yeah, I guess I'll call it Lotus mana. It's just 3. All right, and this is another one, a card that took a while to take off. When this was first being opened out of Modern Horizons, this card was like $1 or $2 for a long time. Then suddenly it shot up one day. But I saw it and I read it and I was like, oh my god, that's perfect for Rosheen. Rosheen's going to love this. So this just doubles all your X things. If you're playing an X permanent, it doubles it. If you're playing an X spell, it makes a copy of that spell with the same X. So if you cast like a big fireball, or I guess we'll talk about one of the fireballs here. There's no actual fireball because there's better than cards than fireball. If you cast Banefire, it kills someone. Suddenly you got 2 Banefires and you can kill 2 people. Or if you cast a big Hydra with 10 as the X, suddenly it's a 20X. This card's insane in this deck. Yeah, this is, as you're probably seeing here, there's a lot of cards in this deck that are just like, that must die right away, or this guy's winning next turn with a big old spell. This deck's kind of weak against counters, by the way, too. Because so it does have its weaknesses. It's not like this is an insane, unstoppable deck. It's just really fun deck, really fun. But yeah, counters hurt. So there's Banefire. It's in the deck. It's one of the best X spells because it can't be countered or prevented. So yeah, I guess countered. This is the only card that can't be countered. Most of the other X spells can be countered. So it's not like this is giant. Yeah, I'd have to get this specifically against a counter deck to beat it. Otherwise, it would be GG. All right, Chandra. This might seem like a weird one to put in, but her -2, yeah, her -2 is really good in this deck. So it says CMC of 3 or less. You may cast an instant or sorcery with CMC 3 or less. If you don't have any in your graveyard, you just keep buffing her up, and that's fine. Or you can get the elementals if you need the elementals. There are uses for those 2 elementals in this deck, which I'll talk about later when I get to the cards that combo with those. But mainly, if you don't have anything to do with her, you just put loyalty counters on her. That's fine. This is basically a regrowth over and over, too, if she's big. Because, see all these big X spells? This has a CMC of 1. So you can recast your Banefire with Chandra. And then next turn, you can recast your Comet Storm. All these X spells have a CMC of like 1 and 2 and 3. So she can recast all your X spells out of your yard over and over. That's why she's in here. And her other, the elementals are useful too. And she's a cheap planeswalker. So she's kind of an all-star. I love this thing. When she's in play, it helps the deck really go off because you can just double your X spells again. It's basically a way to double up your X again. Well, you have to pay for it again, but like Nyla's Intervention or something, you spend it to get lands early, then later in the game you need to wipe flyers, boom, Chandra, no big deal. Or later you need to search land, it's just a way to recast those X spells that you wouldn't think, because it's like, oh, you can only get cheap things. It's like, yeah, well, my cheap things aren't all that cheap, so it's interesting how it works with X spells. Pretty cool. Eternal Witness, because why not? Eternal Witness is amazing. It's just a regrowth on a stick, or on a creature, whatever. Beast Within doesn't really theme with anything, just a nice way to wipe a permanent. There's a lot of problem permanents your opponents may have, and this is just a way to get rid of them. Hunter's Insight. Now this is another one you wouldn't really think, but with all the trample and the big creatures, This usually draws me somewhere between 4 and 12 cards. So for 3 mana to draw that many cards is pretty crazy. Yeah, just a really nice way to refill your hand. Hunter's Insight, I don't know if this is underrated or if people don't know about it, but if you have a green deck, you need this in it. This card's amazing because green's always going through with Stompy. You're always going to, at some point, be doing damage to an opponent with a creature if you're playing green. Hunter's Insight just refills your hand while you're doing that. Absolutely amazing card. Sword of Truth and Justice. Originally, this was just in here because it was the sword I had because I opened a lot of Modern Horizons, but it's pretty nice synergy with this deck because the Proliferate and the +1/+1 counter on something. And protection from white and blue. So no Swords of Plowshares, no Capsize, no Into the Royal, nothing like that. So this deck's kind of weak against blue because they can just bounce your big spells or your big creatures, and you're like, dang, I gotta repay for all that again. But with Sword and Truth and Justice, they can't just bounce your stuff and your big Hydras and stuff. So this sword has kind of been an all-star. And the +1/+1, you can imagine, is just helps things go off. And you have a lot of things with +1/+1 counters on them already from like, whatever it may be, the Great Henge or from the Riot from that other haste thing I was talking about earlier. I can't think of the name of now. Rhythm of the Wild. So it just really kind of accelerates a lot of that stuff. Very, very nice sword for the deck. The other sword that might be really good for the deck would be Sword of Feast and Famine, because you get to untap and read, But I don't have that in here. I just have the Sword of Truth and Justice. Kodama's Reach, one of the best search out lands. Might actually be a slightly better one I could put in here. It just searches for 2 lands for 3 mana, in case you don't know what it does. I'm trying to get it to focus. It's Kodama's Reach. Must have in any green deck, pretty much. 2 basics, 1 into play, 1 into your hand. So nice search out. And Rex Sage, another way to handle some problem artifacts and enchantments and get a creature on the board at the same time. Having creatures on the board is super nice in this deck, of course, so you want as many as possible because of devotion reasons and stuff for Kessig Wolf run, etc., etc. Alright, let's move on. My mouth is getting dry. I'm gonna take a breather here and take a drink. We are on the home stretch though. Hope you guys are enjoying this. Let me know. I love reading feedback. Alright, let's go to the 4-drops. Of course, Rosheen is a 4-drop, so most of the time you'll be playing her as your 4-drop. But if you're not, well, there's some other really amazing things. Or it also happens in the deck where sometimes you'll have no X spells in your hand when it comes around time that you would play Rosheen. So sometimes it's like, well, I could play her, but I have nothing next turn that actually needs her or needs her mana. So there might be other better 4th turn plays. And one of the big ones in here is Thran Dynamo. So if you don't have X, but you just need more mana, Thran Dynamo is the 4-drop. Super good card. Has that mana, Tapping for 3 mana is huge, and if it gets tripled or something, it's just insane. So another way to just scale hard into the X spells. Polychronos, World Eater. This guy's been in and out of the deck. So I've had him in for a while. I took him out, put him back in. He's probably been in and out like 4 times, but he ends up staying in just because he's very strong. He ends up just being really strong. At the very worst, he's a 5/5 for 4 mana. But if you can pump X into this double X monstrosity, you can eat someone's board and then swing in and kill them. And it's pretty easy once you're going off to be like, I just need some big X thing to wreck stuff. This can be the guy. And if he's not that guy, he's still a nice 5/5 on the board. I guess the drawback, which is not that much of a drawback, is if he eats too much stuff, they're all going to do enough damage to him to kill him back because they all damage him back. But you can choose as many targets as you want. You can spread it out. And it's just a nice way to wipe someone's board with X and just get a big creature in the process. So I think he's really strong. And yeah, even if he had no abilities, he's still a decent value. 4/4 for 5, which of course in Commander isn't good. It's really all about this monstrosity thing. So he's pretty good, and he's got the spot. He's in here. Leafcan Avenger. This is a new one out of M21. And it helps scale pretty hard. It's a 4 mana, 4/3, and it taps for 1 green for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. So even just alongside Rosheen, he at least taps for 2. You know, he's always going to tap for 1 for himself, and then 2 with Rosheen, and there's tons of big creatures in here. So it's not rare for this guy to be suddenly tapping for like 5, 6, 7, and it's kind of crazy. And also, he has, if you just run out of anything else to do, he has a big mana dump that could potentially wipe out players. And it's pretty easy to make him big too. There's a lot of things, like you could Kessig Wolf run and then activate this a couple times, and suddenly it's like 10 to that, 10 to that. It only hits players or planeswalkers, but it's nice to have a, it's basically just a big mana critter that happens to have a wipe ability on him that can just wipe planeswalkers or players off the face of the planet. Pretty awesome. I haven't got to playtest him a lot because, as you may have guessed, since this whole 2020 crisis, we haven't played as much, and M21 came out very recently. So, but I think this guy is going to hold this spot for a long time. He's really good in this deck. Garuk, Wild Speaker. This is kind of a no-brainer. This is a really good planeswalker. But the big thing that kept him in the deck is the untapping 2 lands. And if they're the Thran lands or lands that are tapping for 2 or 3 already, it's really good. But even early game, playing him on turn 4, if you don't have X stuff, is just another way to get nice mana that's not Rosheen in the forward spot. So, as you can see, even in the 4 spot, we're mostly focused on still ramping hard. So, it's like this deck, turn 1, 2, 3, usually 1, 2, and 3 are focused on ramping and getting some stuff on the board. Turn 4, turn 5 is where you can start going off usually, unless you get a Soul Ring, and then it can be a turn earlier or 2. But it's not uncommon for this deck to start hitting some big spells by turn 4 or 5, which is nice. Nice for a deck that's just, not a $2,000 Wombo deck. It's only a quarter of that. So, and he's got Overrun on him, which gives everything trample. You know how I love trample. This deck often needs trample to end the game because things can be chumped if they don't. So, in addition to having a really nice mana scaler on him, he can also just overrun. He's kind of broken in this deck. He's really good. This is the golden pig, as the command quarter would say, because this is like a 35-cent card or less. I don't know. Gravitic Punch from one of the Ravnica sets. I wish it wasn't instant. That's the only thing that irks me about this, is it's not instant. I guess the other thing is the casting cost is kind of high. But look what it does. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target player. Now, another weakness of this deck is if people have fog and you don't have any of your X damage to a player spells, you can't end it with swings. So getting around Spike Weaver and stuff, Gravitic Punch does it. It only does it to players, but this is a game ender. This is when you have a 20/20 or a 30/30 creature or something you recently berserked. You just pay this and be like, boom, 30 damage to you for 4 mana. So it's one of those kind of cards. Or, I guess there's Craterhoof in here. Craterhoof, I don't know if actually belongs in here, because this deck doesn't necessarily go wide. It goes kind of wide, but usually it's only like 4 or 5. So he might not be the best card in here, but the point I'm getting to here anyway is he works really well with Gravitic Punch. Craterhoof, and then after combat, use the punch and finish off your opponent. And what really sold me on this card, well, by itself wouldn't be that great, but the jump start, you can do it twice. You need to do 60 damage? Just do it again. Boom, boom. So it's just like a double whammy. I really want to kill 2 players with this. I mean, how satisfying is it to just wipe people off the playmat or off the table with a 25-cent card that nobody's even read before? It's just so satisfying to do that. So I always try to play 1 or 2 cards that nobody's even seen before that can end games. I love doing that. That's really satisfying to me. So this is that card. I know it's not the greatest. It could probably be a better card in the deck in this spot, but for what it does, it has potential. So I'll just say that there's a chance that this will be taken out of the deck at some point, replaced by something stronger. But in the meantime, I'm going to try to end some games with this and get some laughs out of it and have people go, "What? Why are you playing that, Matt? What? You just won with such a stupid card." Anyway, let's move on. Sky Shroud Claim. This is a no-brainer. It gets forest, so you can get those multi-tap lands or whatever, stomping ground type lands that we talked about earlier. Since it gets forests, that's why it's in here. It can help mana fix into the red too. Outpost Siege. Now, you just choose cons. You just pay 4 mana and say cons. Never ever say dragons. It's just not for that. This is just, it's really good in the deck because I know it's a lot of words, but all this really says is you draw an extra card during your turn. So it's just a way to keep the keep flowing, to keep your engine on. So if you don't get any of the other card draw, that's one of the weaknesses of this deck. You can run out of steam and just have nothing. So this is just one of those cards that says you get an extra card per turn. Of course, it's an exile, and you got to the end of turn to play it. If it's a land, you can play it. But it's basically draw an extra card every turn. So it's basically the, the Phyrexian Arena, but red. I love this card. This card is cool. It's a little, I don't know, 5 mana is a little expensive, but for an extra card every turn for the rest of the game, it's pretty solid. And typically this stays in play because you usually have big doublers and other crazy enchantments that people are like, oh, I gotta kill that. So this usually sits around and helps you find more of those crazy doublers and stuff that people, so it's hard to remove this when there's a million other threats that are like, the game's gonna end, kill that thing type of stuff. So Outpost Siege often just gets to sit around. But this is the one you need to kill because it's going to keep refilling my hand. I don't know. It's a good card. It's every time I get to play that, it really changes the game for me. And it's a decent 4th turn play because the earlier you can start getting an extra card every turn, the better. It just really sucks when you get like a giant thing early game, like a Crater Hoof that you can't play because he's in exile. But it doesn't matter. It's whatever. It's doing its job. All right, let's continue on. 5 drops. There's only a couple 5 drops. This kind of surprised me looking at the deck that there's only a few 5 drops. Any of the X's could be 5s. But Return of the Wildspeaker, another way to refill your hand. Kind of a no-brainer. Another one from Throne of Eldraine. I say a lot of no-brainers, huh? Yeah. I know, it says a lot of stuff. It's non-human creatures get giant or +3/+3. No trample, so that's unfortunate, but that can help sometimes. But really what you want to do with this instant is draw a gazillion cards with this first one. Because all these hydras and giants and elementals and elephants and whatever, there's really no humans in here. Anytime you cast this, it's pretty much, at the end of your turn, right before my turn, I'm going to draw 10 cards. And then I'm going to kill you because I have a million things. So, insane card. Just broken. I was going to put Greater Good in this deck, but instead I went with Return of the Wildspeaker over Greater Good, which is a controversial decision, but that's the spot it took. It's also a lot cheaper. Greater Good's like a real expensive card. That thing's hardly worth anything, but pick this up. If you don't have one of these yet and you're playing green, get it. This card is going to be going up for the rest of your life. It's not going to go down. This card is so good. Anyone playing green is going to want one, and eventually, whenever Throne of Eldraine is out of print, it's going to get harder and harder to get. So, might as well get one. This is another guy, the cheap version of Xenagos, the cheapest one I could find because he's an expensive card. But Xenagos, his big point really is the haste and +X/+X. So you play a big Hydra, it's already a 15/15. Now it's a 30/30 haste. I really, really wish he gave trample, but it doesn't matter. He's still really good. And he's indestructible. He's just something that really, it's another doubler basically. This deck loves doublers because you want your 15 to turn into 30, you want your 30 to turn into 60, and you want the game to end and you to go, hooray, I won. And he just makes that happen with all your big creatures basically. Makes it happen. And then if you have Berserk, it's essentially a ×4 at this point, because ×2 again. Yeah, you know how that works. Basic math. You play Magic, you know some basic math. All right, let's look at the 6 drops. This is where things start getting crazy. Real crazy. This is where people start hating me. Really hating me if they don't already, because this deck is a little frustrating to play against sometimes. I know. But it's lost. It's lost a lot. Vigor. I don't know if you've read Vigor before. This is another card that's just completely insane, that every time I read it, I think, did I read that wrong? Is this really as good? Okay, so you have to kill Vigor. You see Vigor, you kill Vigor. Otherwise, no damage happens to my other creatures ever, and they all get +1/+1 counters anytime you do damage to them. So, yeah, and he gets shuffled in if he dies, so you gotta find a way to exile him. You gotta, like, Swords to Plowshare him or something. So he's just a GG. It's like, I'm swinging, you block, whatever, now they're bigger. So he's really good. But his ability does say other creatures, so he doesn't prevent the damage to himself. He still gets killed by earthquakes and whatever. But all your other creatures will double, so you probably don't want to earthquake him. Wart, another doubler. And this is the card that works with Chandra. You probably know what Wart does. It's a pretty old card from whatever set that is. I forget. I wasn't playing when it came out. Kind of expensive, 6 to bring out, but it gives you 2 goblins, and he gives all your instant sorcery, instants and sorceries that are red or green conspire. So you conspire, you can tap 2 creatures of that color, you get another spell of the same type. So it's just another doubler. Any of these big spells, which I'm going to get to. These are all big X spells over here that are super nice to double. And also the Chandra elementals. Chandra elementals can be tapped. So if you just need more creatures, you can bring out those little Chandra elementals for him to tap. But the goblins and him and the other green stuff you have is usually enough. So a really awesome, awesome creature. Fiery Emancipation, a new one out of M21. Everything you do does triple damage. I don't think I need to explain. You see this, you kill it, or you're going to die. Triple damage after everything else that's already going on. A triple on top of that is just like, all right, just start shuffling. Let's go to the next game. All right, we'll get Craterhoof out of the way. I just want to real quick talk about him because this is another way the elementals from Chandra are good. Because it's just another thing to scale his +X because there's the number of creatures you control. And Wart kind of combos with him. I'm honestly considering taking him out of the deck though. Because every time, I don't know. He doesn't really actually fit the theme. Because it's not a deck that's made to go wide. But he's in here. Yeah, I know. You hate it. You hate the Craterhoof. He wins games. Does he give trample? Yeah, all your creatures gain trample and +X, where X, you know what Craterhoof does. Everyone's seen Craterhoof. He's a scoop. You see him, you scoop. Alright, let's talk about other really annoying cards. How many people are groaning right now just seeing this? How many people are going, Vorinclex, But yeah, he's not banned. I'm sorry he's not banned. He should be banned. He really should. But if I ever get to search a creature up and put him into play, this is who I'm grabbing, because this is how you win games. You know, half the time I play him, what happens, he gets killed, and someone else reanimates him on their side of the board, and I'm the one going, ugh. So I kind of hate playing him because of that, but it's still funny nonetheless. This card's just so good. He's nuts. He's nuts. So, okay, in case you've never seen him before, well, you can pause and read him if you want, but the big thing that makes everybody on the other side of the board hate him is this: your land doesn't untap anytime you tap it for mana. So anytime your opponent taps land for mana, they're down for 2 turns. Meanwhile, you're getting double. Yeah, everybody hates Vorinclex. I know. Let's talk about more awesome cards. Yeah, we have the Great Henge to draw cards when creatures come out. We also have Zendikar Resurgent that does a very similar thing. Your creatures come out, you get to draw a card. So a lot of things to keep the hand refilling and rolling in this deck, because it's needed once you start going off big. And yeah, just another way to get double mana out of your lands. Well, it's actually 1 additional, it's not double. Whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana of an additional, just 1 additional mana. So not a doubler exactly, but it's kind of a doubler, because if your lands tap for 1, now they tap for 2. But if your lands tap for 3, they only tap for 4. So, but the draw a card is like such a cherry on top for your creatures. So this card is super strong in this deck. Another thing that your opponents have to remove or you're going to go off. And another big guy that's in here. He doesn't really theme with the deck so much, but he's just, you got to have him. Terastodon. He kills 3 permanents when he comes out. So he's just, sometimes you're just like, I got to get rid of multiple enchantments or multiple lands, and this is the perfect thing. You drop him, you kill a bunch of stuff, and you get a 9/9 elephant in the process. So he's just such good removal that he's necessary. He can't kill creatures, but that usually doesn't matter because you have big ground pounders yourself, so you're generally not worried about ground pounders. Flyers can be a little bit of a problem, but we got ways of handling them. But still, enchantments, artifacts, lands, planeswalkers, he can take care of them all. And who cares if they get an elephant? You can block their little elephants. Alright, looks like we're into the X spells. The last over here are the X spells. Hope you're enjoying this video. Once again, we're getting to the 50-minute mark. We'll wrap it up. Max of an hour, it looks like it's going to be. My throat's getting dry, so these are the X spells. Alright, I know I said that a bunch, but this is the like the bread and butter, the I don't know, maybe it's the butter, the jelly. This is the true excitement. This is where things are just like, oh, stop it, just stop it, I'm dead. Alright, well, not this one. We'll talk about the weaker ones first. Yeah, let me pull up the weaker ones. I don't know, some of these are actually like not super strong, but we'll see. So we have Uncage the Menagerie. Now this is a weird one because it has X, but you don't want X to be a lot on this card. You want X to be like 3 or 4. Because, yeah, you saw there's some, or even 6. So often I'll play this on turn 2 or 3 just to get my Land War Elf. Or often I'll use X as 2 to get the some annoying 2-drops like Sakura Tribe Elder and what's that? The Orcish Settlers. So this is just a way to grab multiple cards. I don't know, I've kind of considered not playing this because it's sort of annoying to play. It's like, I gotta pick a number, I gotta think about what's left of my deck. But usually this ends up being 2 or 3 and I just grab some mana critters or some utility or Orcish Settlers. Sometimes I'll go really big on it and grab something really big out of the deck, but if I pay like 6 into this, it's Vorinclex and Terastodon. So there's only 2, it's not 6 6s. You only get 2 of the 6s. So it's a pretty weird card the way it reads, but it ends up being pretty good, and it's pretty easy to pay whatever you want into it with Rosheen, so it's usually not a hard thing to be like, well, I only want 1 or 2 certain creatures, but I can still pay 8 or whatever, because it's got X. But really ends up being a pretty cool card in the deck, because you can just get what you want out of your deck. This guy, he's been in and out of the deck a lot. He's in it right now, but I'm probably going to take him out. I think he's actually on the line for the number 1 to cut, actually. Just every time I play him, he ends up not really doing much. Sure, he's giant, but he doesn't have trample. And this mana you gotta pump to even do damage to things. It's 2 mana for 1 damage, and you can't use Rosheen for it, so that's why. But if X is 5 or more, it doubles. So it's pretty easy to say, oh, cast him for 10, that's an 8/8, but nope, turns into 16. And then you Berserk him or Zenghost him next turn, and he's got trample. Yeah, so you can see how it can just be crazy because it's got a doubling effect. But it not having trample natively is the biggest problem with this thing. If it had trample, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's just the best Hydra. But Apocalypse Hydra is only iffy in this deck. But he's still a way to spend your X and get something massive. He's just very easy to deal with or chump. But that's his drawback. So, but let's talk about. Yeah, I said I was going to talk about the weaker ones first. Don't worry, we got some strong boys back there. We got some strong boys. Hungering Hydra. This one's actually not bad. Can only be blocked by 1 creature, and it just grows. So it's just one of those things that it's such an annoyance. Be like, oh, coming at you with my big Hydra, and you pretty much got to block it, or you're taking 20, and they can chump it, but then he just keeps growing, and you chump it again, and it keeps growing. This is another one I might cut. I really like that he's super cheap and that he's so annoying, but it's not really a game ender unless you give him trample. So that's the problem with both these Hydras. That's the reason they're considered weak, is they don't have trample natively. But with Xenagos or Berserk or something, yeah, you basically just need a trample on them. Or I guess, the lifelink enchantment, the Shadow Sphere, that's super nice. If you have that, they're fine. If you don't have that, they're not so fine. Alright, so let's talk about the trample boys, or the ones that are super, super, super good. Let's just talk about the best one. Let's go, I guess this is the best one. They're all amazing, but this is probably the best one. And he's also worth a lot, so you would kind of know that he's already powerful just based on his price. And it is Primordial Hydra. Every upkeep, he doubles his X. And once he has 10 or more, he has trample. So he does natively have trample as soon as he's big, and that's perfect. So you play him as early as you want. Even you play him for 1 and people leave him alone after a couple turns, and if you end up putting more 1/1 counters on him through other methods, this guy becomes massive. You don't have to pump a ton of mana into him, and he just keeps growing. So this guy, if people don't kill it, the game's over. You will win with this Primordial Hydra, and that's the reason this card is worth so much. I've seen this guy grow to like, I don't know, what's the biggest I've seen him? Trying to think here. I've seen him over 60. At that point, everyone's groaning and looking at each other like, you got a way to kill that? You got a way to kill that? We're going to lose, guys. Primordial Hydra over there. It's got trample. All right. Another pretty crazy one. This one's new, M20. I don't think this one has seen too much hype yet, but it's one of the better Hydras for sure. And it is Voracious Hydra. So, yeah, it's already a 0/1, so you can cast it for X 0 if you want, and it lives. Or if it comes from your graveyard by some other method. You know, it's just not one of those Hydras that auto dies. It actually lives when it comes out for 0. So that's sort of nice, but it often doesn't matter. But the choices you get, you probably know this one just because it's new, and if you've been playing Magic recently, you've seen it a bunch. But it has trample natively, so perfect. That's +1. But also, when you cast it, you can just choose to double the counters on it, or you can fight something. So it ends up being removal and a big Hydra. Or if you don't need the removal, it's just even a bigger Hydra. This guy's really good. He is so strong in the deck. All right, who else are we talking about? This one, I'll get to him last because he's not really a game ender. He's just super utility. Lifeblood Hydra. This one's pretty good. It has trample. I really hate the 3 green. This guy ends up being hard to cast on some occasions, but he has to be exiled. People are looking for a way to exile. Excuse me. People are looking for a way to exile Lifeblood Hydra by the time he comes out, because if they don't exile him, you get to draw cards equal to his power. So, you know, usually I play this guy as soon as I can because I need the cards or something. But even X is 4, it's still 4/4. It's going to draw you 4 cards. But if you can get it giant, if you can get it to like 20 or something, that's almost too much. Your 20 life and 20 cards is nice, but how do you play 20 cards? You're going to need a ton of mana. In this deck, it likes to play 1 spell for all that mana. So it doesn't necessarily need 20 cards. So this guy's kind of a weird spot. You think you want to cast him for as big as you can, but typically you cut it off at 7 or 10. You don't want to go much bigger than that. But even at that, he's super good. So this is a must-have in the deck. There's no way this guy's ever getting removed because, well, hand refill. Hand refill is so crucial sometimes. You lose the game without it, basically, and he's just one that has it. So another new one, another Throne of Eldraine broken card. You know this guy, Coil Serpent. Reach, trample, protection from multicolored, and just a flat X casting cost. So he's as big as you spend, and he's got reach, and he's got trample, and protection. Wow, this card is crazy. This card is so good in the deck. Yeah. I don't think I need to say anymore. You can imagine why he's so good. He's just another one that they got to get rid of or they're going to die. And he's such good defense. That protection from multicolored. There are so many big multicolored commanders and stuff. This guy is just a commander stopper. If you're not playing monocolored, you can't beat me once I play this guy, basically. That's what it feels like sometimes. It's not completely true, but he just makes it so commanders can't attack you anymore, basically. He's so good. All right, Steelbane Hydra. It's a new one. Another one from Throne of Eldraine. Commander Throne of Eldraine, but I smell a lot of Throne of Eldraine OP-ness in this deck. Yeah, he doesn't have trample, but he doesn't need it because that's not his point. His point is he can just targeted removal enchantments and artifacts all day. So you get him out, for whatever, 7, 8, 9. And sure, he's a big Hydra. But also, now you hold this looming threat on the board that's like, you don't want to mess with me because I will kill your Mirari's Wake. And you know I can do it because I got a Steelbane Hydra. And you don't want to mess with me either because I'll kill your Soul Ring. And, you know, it's just, there's so many problem artifacts and enchantments or ones that your opponents want to keep around that just having him on the board is such like political pressure that they're just like, oh god, how do I deal with that guy? He's got a Steelbane Hydra. He's gonna kill my precious artifacts and enchantments and all of them, as many as he wants. You know, it's really good. It's a really good card. All right, so 8 cards left. Here we go. We're almost done. And we're having fun. I'm having fun. This is actually pretty fun to do. I'm going to do this more often. I got some more decks. Don't worry. Anyway, Green Sun Zenith. Yeah, so usually I grab Vorinclex with this. I'll just say it. This is Vorinclex Grabber, and it shuffles back into your library. Actually, you know, a lot of times I'll play this on turn 2 as like a ramp to grab turn 2 or turn 3, because you can grab your little cheap mana elves or mana critters with this. And it's really good in that way too. So this is such a good card because it works as ramp to grab those little mana critters, and it works as late game game ender. You can grab Vorinclex, you can grab Craterhoof Behemoth, and if you played it early, you might draw it late too because it shuffles back in. This card is busted. There's a reason it's worth so much. So yeah, super good X spell, just crazy X spell, and it's really easy to get it off for huge. So Vorinclex turn 3 or 4 or 5 can happen really easily with Rosheen and Green Sun Zenith because you're basically paying X into a non-X's casting cost, and that's what all these end up being here that I'm going to talk about. Just paying X into non-X casting cost stuff. Get focus going. Here we go. Okay. No, not going to do it. What if I block this side and you can just see my arm? I don't know. It's a Genesis wave. It's a Genesis wave. I guess you gotta Google it because my camera sucks. Alright, there we go. There we go. So there's his casting cost. 3 green. I hate the 3 green. 3 green is sometimes hard to work with. But still, what it does, if you can get this off for 8, generally 8's the target number because that's the biggest thing in here is an 8 drop. 8 casting cost. Actually, I guess 9 would be the highest because great hinge. So you want to get this off for 9 to potentially hit. 9 puts everything you get on the board. 8 will pretty much grab everything. But yeah, revealing top X, put any number of permanents with mana cost X or less onto the battlefield. Getting this off early for 8 or 9 or whatever. You can pay more, then you just get more stuff. But you want to get at least 8 or 9. And boom, you get a bunch of lands, you get a bunch of big creatures. Sure, your Hydras die, but there's only a few in here. There's only like 4 or 5 big Hydras, so majority of the time you get one big creature and you get a bunch of lands, and it's just crazy. And enchantments, artifacts. This card is busted in this deck. It is crazy. This card wins me games. To be like, oh guys, I don't know, I had a great start. Turn 4, Genesis Wave for 12. Boom, now I've got a board like this game's been going on for 30 minutes, except it's only been going on for 2 minutes, and yeah, it just blows out the game and wins. Genesis Wave, another just nutty card in this deck. Alright, Court of Calling. Yeah, this is a very popular card. 3 green in the X, but it doesn't matter too much because it has Convoke, which helps a ton. And yeah, you get a creature with X or less onto the battlefield. Another way to pay X and get a non-X creature. So you know what this grabs? It's Vorinclex. And there's other creatures other than Vorinclex, but it's usually Vorinclex. I'll talk about the others in a second. Finale of Devastation, War of the Spark, super amazing War of the Spark. If you can get it for 10 or more, all your creatures get plus whatever you paid and haste until the end of turn. So if you just imagine grabbing Craterhoof Behemoth with this after paying 10, it's game over. But even if you have to pay less and get something good, it's just such a good card. So yeah, I guess we go back to so with any of these, you can grab Xenagos if you need Xenagos for 5, super amazing. You can grab Vigor for 6. You can grab Wart for 6. You can grab Craterhoof for 8. You can grab Vorinclex for 8. And you can grab Terastodon for 8 if you need some removal. So those are all really nice. And if you're only 4, you got Polychronos. Oh yeah, that's another reason he's stated here. Genesis Wave hits him and hits him good. And he's an X creature that, you want. So Genesis Wave is nutty in this deck. It's a nutty card. Alright, last 4. These are all damage spells. These are just one shot, you're dead. We already talked about Banefire, that was earlier. So there's actually 5 of these in the deck. There's 5 direct damage, you're done type cards. We got Better Fireball, also known as Comet Storm. Just does X damage to any target, but you can multi-kicker it. You pay the multi-kicker as many times as you want. You get as many different targets. So you just multi-kick it to 1 to each opponent, and boom. You win the game in one shot with Comet Storm. It's that card. Or if nothing else, you can wipe some planeswalkers and annoying creatures if you can't quite end the game. And it's not a sorcery. It's an instant. So you do it before your turn or in response to something. And this is like one of the best X spells for sure. We got Fall of the Titans. This is another way to end the game. Another instant. And it does X damage to each of up to 2 creatures or players. Usually I choose 2 players if I cast this, because just being able to kill 2 players at once is always nice. If you kill one of them, then the other one's like, oh, we gotta kill him. But if you kill them both at the same time, then you got less problems to deal with after your first blowout. Yeah, it's double X. but it's not double X if you've already played something. So typically you play a cheap spell, you play a Soul Ring, you play, I don't know, just one of your cheap elves or something, and then you surge it, and you hit 2 people for the cost of a single blaze, you know? So pretty cool, and it just being instant is just icing on the cake. So Fall of the Titans is amazing, and of course Electro Dominance. Oh my god, this card. Everyone hates this card so much. It's instant. That's the biggest thing about it, is it's instant, and it does X damage to any target. But also, on top of just it being X damage to any target and instant, you can put something on your hand with up to the casting cost of X right onto the board. So you're like, end of your turn, Electro Dominance you for 20, put Vorinclex onto the board, or Vigor, or something like that. And it's just like, oh god, on top of the big damage, now you're just putting something on the board for free too? Jeez. Alright, so yeah, insane. Or, you know, you can use this as like a surprise blocker too. Someone attacks you, you Electro Dominance one thing, you drop a creature to block, and it's, you know, a lot of tricks with this card. It's really, really strong in this deck. And this one's sort of iffy. I've considered changing this, but it's Conflagrate. And sure, it's got double X, but you typically don't pay it for that cost. I guess you can if you have to. But usually this ends up in your yard after you've already blown out the game some way. So you choose it as one of your discard cards when you got a bunch of cards in your hand and need to discard something. And then you just say, all right, well, at this point, I discard this many cards, and yeah. So it's just a way to do a ton of damage from the from the yard after you draw a bunch of cards with Return of the Wild Speaker or something. I don't know about this card in the deck, but also it's a sorcery, so that's kind of annoying. And the double X, if nothing else, you can pay the double X as hard as you want, and you know, spread out a bunch of damage and kill like someone's whole board or something. Iffy spot. I don't know about Conflag. Not sure about that in the deck, but it's okay. It's just okay. And you can see how any of this stuff just gets super nutty with all these doublers and triplers and Berserk. And that's Rosheen Meanderer. Yeah, this little common that no one plays because it's cheesy mana that's hard to spend. I made it work, and it's a lot of fun. Thank you guys. I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.